6 hours ago, something happened above your head that has no name in any scientific textbook ever written. Not an anomaly, not a glitch, not a sensor malfunction. What the Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base began recording at 8:42 UTC this morning is a complete, total, and irreversible violation of the laws of physics as we understand them. 18 of Earth's satellites have been physically removed from their orbits, repositioned with millimeter precision, and arranged into a geometrically perfect circle 4,000 kilometers above the planet's surface. No thrusters fired. No fuel was burned. No force of any measurable kind was applied. And the event is still unfolding right now as you watch this. To truly grasp what that means, you first need to understand how orbital mechanics actually works, because only then will you feel the full impact of what has been broken. A satellite is not a car, not a plane, not even a conventional spacecraft in the way most people picture it. It does not propel itself through space in a straight line. It falls. Constantly and perpetually, it falls toward Earth. The reason it never hits the ground is that it is moving forward so fast, roughly 7.6 kilometers every single second, that the surface curves away beneath it at the same rate it falls toward it. An orbit is, at its core, a perfectly calibrated freefall. And to change that orbit, to shift a satellite's altitude, adjust its angle, or move it from one position to another, requires energy. It requires thrust. It requires fuel. This is not debatable. The Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, derived in 1903 and governing every single orbital maneuver in the entire history of spaceflight, is unambiguous on this point. To change the velocity of a mass, you must expend propellant. The fuel tanks must empty. The thrusters must fire. The exhaust must be detectable. These are not engineering guidelines. They are physical law. At 8:42 UTC, Starlink 1143, a routine low Earth orbit communications satellite traveling at 7.66 kilometers per second, abruptly changed its orbital vector. In 3 seconds, it moved 45 kilometers east. Its fuel tanks remained 100% full. Its ion thrusters registered completely cold. No exhaust plume was detected. No thermal signature appeared. No propellant expenditure of any measurable quantity was recorded. The satellite moved 45 kilometers instantaneously, and according to its own internal accelerometers, felt absolutely nothing. NASA's Deep Space Network at Goldstone detected the signal drift first, and immediately flagged it as a sensor malfunction. Then ESA's tracking station in Malargüe, Argentina reported the identical vector change independently, using entirely different instrumentation. Then the Global Amateur Astronomy Network, thousands of independent observers tracking the satellite visually against the background star field, confirmed the physical displacement with their own eyes. 3 completely independent detection systems. 3 entirely different methodologies. 1 unavoidable conclusion. 3 minutes later, at 8:45 UTC, the situation escalated dramatically. Vista 3 Americas, a 6-metric-ton communications satellite in geostationary transfer orbit, experienced the exact same phenomenon. A velocity change of approximately 4,000 meters per second, executed without fuel, without thrust, without a single trace of thermal output. The European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt confirmed zero heat signature across the entire maneuver. To physically relocate 6 metric tons of spacecraft by 400 kilometers across orbital planes requires, under the rocket equation, the combustion of thousands of kilograms of propellant. The physics is not approximate. It is immutable. Yet VSAT 3's internal sensors recorded zero G-force throughout the entire event. Here is the distinction that every physicist tracking this event keeps returning to. The satellite was not pushed. The space around the satellite was moved. Theoretical models of Higgs field manipulation, the mechanism by which the quantum field responsible for giving all particles their mass could be locally suppressed, predict exactly this observational signature. An object whose local Higgs field interaction is reduced becomes effectively massless within that suppressed region. A massless object requires zero energy to accelerate, zero energy to redirect, and experiences no inertial resistance whatsoever. It registers no G-force. It moves as though the property of mass has been temporarily switched off, because under this framework, it has been. This is not engineering at the edge of human capability. This is the engineering of a physical constant itself. By 9 UTC, 3 GPS Block 3 satellites, designated SV4, SV5, and SV9, were simultaneously extracted from their orbital slots. These satellites were moving in different orbital planes, at different altitudes, at different velocities, and yet they were grabbed at the same instant and repositioned in a single, perfectly coordinated operation. To even calculate the orbital mechanics required for 3 simultaneous repositioning maneuvers of that precision demands computational power exceeding every supercomputer on Earth operating in parallel. The N-body gravitational problem, the mathematical challenge of computing the simultaneous gravitational interactions of multiple objects, scales in complexity exponentially with every additional body added to the system. It is one of the foundational, unsolved problems in classical mechanics. No human computer system solves it in real time at this scale. Whatever is executing these maneuvers solves it as a baseline function, the way a calculator handles addition. By 10 UTC, 12 satellites from 4 different nations had been repositioned. By the time the count reached 18, the pattern embedded in the telemetry data became impossible to attribute to anything other than deliberate geometric intent. Every repositioned satellite was converging on the same orbital inclination, 51.6 degrees relative to the equator. Every aerospace engineer watching this feed recognized that number immediately. It is the orbital inclination of the International Space Station. They are not targeting the station. They are building a ring around it, a geometrically perfect circle with a radius of exactly 4,000 kilometers, satellites spaced with millimeter precision, the entire formation holding its geometry against the differential gravitational and atmospheric drag forces that should be pulling each individual unit off course at different rates. It is not drifting, it is not degrading. It is being actively maintained by something we cannot see and cannot measure. The Fermi Gamma-ray Space Telescope detected a gravitational wave fluctuation lasting 0.04 seconds surrounding one satellite during its repositioning. A ripple in space-time consistent with a localized, artificial gravity well being created ahead of the object and then instantly dissolved upon arrival. The energy density required to produce a focused gravity well of that magnitude, without destabilizing the surrounding orbital infrastructure, represents in theoretical calculations an output of approximately 10 to the 9th joules, delivered in 4 milliseconds. To put that in perspective, that is the total energy consumption of the entire human civilization for 1 full year, released in the duration of a camera flash. And the source of that energy remains completely undetected, no visible vessel, no power system of any kind, no structure intercepting stellar radiation. The energy is appearing as though drawn directly from the vacuum itself, from the zero-point energy that quantum mechanics confirms exists in every cubic centimeter of empty space, theoretically infinite in magnitude, and completely untapped by any human technology ever developed. Whatever is doing this is not applying force to Earth's satellites. It is rewriting the physics of the space those satellites occupy. And at 12:30 UTC, the formation crossed into its next phase entirely. Every satellite in the ring stopped transmitting its own individual signal simultaneously. GPS positioning ceased, communication streams cut, and in place of each satellite's individual telemetry, a single unified carrier wave emerged across the entire ring at once, broadcasting at 1,420.4 MHz. Anyone familiar with radio astronomy will recognize that frequency immediately. It is the hydrogen line, the electromagnetic frequency emitted by the most abundant element in the universe, the frequency that every SETI researcher on Earth has monitored for decades as the most logical channel for interstellar communication. Every satellite had been repurposed into a single coordinated transmitter broadcasting the universal frequency of the cosmos. But the signal was not aimed at deep space. It was not directed toward another star system. It was pointed inward, downward, directly at the planet below. NASA's Deep Space Network processed the first data packet at 12:34 UTC. What came back from the analysis at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory stopped the room completely. Not prime numbers. Not mathematical sequences. Not the abstract logical language that SETI theorists had long predicted first contact would use. A map. A three-dimensional geometric representation of our entire solar system, rendered in electromagnetic data, transmitted through 18 of Earth's own satellites, encoded with a spatial precision that exceeded every mapping standard our own instruments are capable of producing. The map was accurate in every measurable detail but one. Earth was gone. In the precise position where Earth's orbital path should have appeared, the transmission showed a debris field. not a degraded signal, not a rendering artifact. A dispersed ring of fragmented material occupying Earth's exact orbital radius, the unmistakable visual signature of a world that no longer exists as a coherent body. This single data point triggered an emergency session at the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs at 13 UTC. In 7 decades of SETI research and space observation, that body has never once convened an emergency meeting over an astronomical event. The threshold for that response did not exist in any prior protocol. The meeting was called anyway. But the transmission did not stop at the map. At 1314 UTC, the entire satellite ring shifted its output frequency simultaneously, dropping from 1420.4 MHz all the way down to 7.83 Hz. That is a drop of 11 orders of magnitude in carrier frequency, executed across 24 satellites in perfect unison, with zero transition lag between any individual unit in the formation. The synchronization precision required for that simultaneous shift across a ring spanning 4,000 kilometers, accounting for the light travel time differences between satellites at different positions in the ring, implies a coordination mechanism operating faster than electromagnetic signal propagation between the units themselves. They are not communicating with each other to stay synchronized. They are being synchronized by something external to all of them at once. The frequency they locked onto is not arbitrary. 7.83 Hz is the Schumann resonance. The fundamental electromagnetic frequency of the cavity formed between Earth's surface and its ionosphere, first calculated by physicist Winfried Schumann in 1952, and subsequently confirmed by continuous global monitoring networks ever since. The Schumann resonance is the standing electromagnetic wave that Earth itself generates. Every lightning strike on the planet contributes energy to this resonance. It has maintained its fundamental frequency with extraordinary stability across billions of years of geological history. It is, in the most literal sense possible, the planet's own electromagnetic heartbeat. And now 24 repositioned satellites, controlled by an interstellar object 240 million kilometers away, are pulsing at its exact frequency. The implications of that particular frequency choice are not subtle. The human brain operates in electromagnetic frequency bands that directly overlap this range. Alpha waves, associated with relaxed wakefulness, occupy 8 to 12 Hz. Theta waves, associated with deep relaxation, and the threshold state between wakefulness and sleep, occupy 4 to 8 Hz. The Schumann resonance at 7.83 Hz sits precisely at the boundary between these two neurological states. The relationship between Schumann resonance fluctuations and human neurological function is not fringe science. It is an active area of research in biophysics with peer-reviewed studies documenting correlations between resonance variations and measurable cardiovascular and neurological metrics in human subjects. Within minutes of the 7.83 Hz pulse beginning, ground station operators across 3 continents reported identical observations. Every radio band went silent, not attenuated, not reduced, but completely silent. The electromagnetic noise floor that forms the constant background of a technologically active civilization, the aggregate signal of billions of transmitting devices, atmospheric interference, and solar radiation, dropped to absolute zero. Across the entire monitored radio spectrum, the only signal present anywhere on Earth was the pulse. Rhythmic, precise, penetrating. Then, at 1320 UTC, the pulse began to modulate. It started encoding complex geometric data, not in binary, not in simple amplitude modulation, but in a multidimensional geometric encoding scheme that NASA's signal analysis team spent 11 minutes identifying as a 3-dimensional data structure embedded in the phase relationships between all 24 satellite transmitters operating simultaneously. The ring is not simply a transmitter. It is a phased array antenna of planetary scale. A system in which the precise timing relationships between individual elements create interference patterns that focus and shape the emitted signal with a directionality and resolution impossible from any single antenna. 24 satellites spaced with millimeter precision at exactly 15-degree intervals around a 4,000-kilometer ring constitute the most powerful antenna array ever constructed in the history of this planet. Its angular resolution at operating frequencies exceeds any radio telescope array humanity has ever built. Its signal-to-noise ratio, with the entire electromagnetic noise floor suppressed, is effectively infinite. Whatever needed to be transmitted required exactly this instrument to transmit it. At 1345 UTC, the formation began to rotate. Not the individual satellites shifting relative to each other, but the entire ring as a single rigid structure, spinning around Earth at 1,200 kilometers per hour while maintaining perfect internal geometry. The spacing between satellites did not change. The ring radius did not fluctuate by a single measurable unit. 24 independent spacecraft, each subject to different gravitational gradient forces, different atmospheric drag coefficients at their respective orbital positions, and different solar radiation pressure vectors, held in flawless rigid formation while rotating as one unified body. This is not orbital mechanics. Orbital mechanics cannot produce rigid formation rotation of this kind under any circumstances. Each satellite in a ring formation at slightly different orbital positions experiences measurably different gravitational and drag forces that will pull the formation apart within hours without continuous active correction. The correction thrust required to maintain rigid geometry across 24 satellites simultaneously would be detectable as thermal output, as propellant expenditure, as radio command traffic between ground controllers and the spacecraft. None of these signatures are present anywhere in the data. The ring is being held together by the same mechanism that moved the satellites in the first place: local spacetime geometry manipulation. The space the ring occupies is being shaped to treat the entire formation as a single gravitationally coherent object. And as the ring rotates, the frequency is climbing. It began at 7.83 Hz. By 1350 UTC, it had reached 8.1 Hz. The acceleration curve is steady and rising. A rotating ring of charged, conductive material generates a magnetic field perpendicular to the plane of rotation. This is basic electromagnetic induction, the same principle driving every electrical generator on Earth, first described by Michael Faraday in 1831. As the rotation rate increases, the induced magnetic field strength increases proportionally. At relativistic rotational velocities, the energy density of that field approaches the threshold required to create measurable spacetime curvature, not metaphorically, but in the precise mathematical sense of Einstein's field equations, where energy density contributes to the stress-energy tensor that determines the geometry of spacetime itself. What is being constructed above Earth right now is a cyclotron, a particle accelerator the size of a planet, using Earth's own satellites as the accelerating ring, drawing power from the zero-point energy of the vacuum, spinning toward a critical resonance frequency that theoretical models indicate will produce a spacetime geometry event at the center of the ring. And at the center of a 4,000-kilometer ring oriented at 51.6 degrees inclination around Earth, every geometric line of force from every satellite in the formation converges on a single point, not in low Earth orbit, not at the surface, but deep in Earth's mantle, targeted with the same millimeter precision used to position the satellites themselves. The ring is not aimed at space, it is aimed directly at Earth. Every data point this analysis has assembled converges on a single coherent framework: the Higgs field suppression that moved the satellites without force, the zero-point energy extraction that powered the maneuvers without a visible source, the rigid formation maintenance that overrides orbital mechanics entirely, the planetary scale cyclotron spinning toward critical resonance. These are not separate anomalies. They are sequential steps in a single engineering operation being executed by a civilization that the Kardashev scale places at Type 3, a civilization for which the energy output of an entire galaxy is a working budget, for which the manipulation of quantum fields and spacetime geometry is not theoretical but infrastructural. The debris field in the original transmission is dated. It corresponds to a calculated orbital convergence window that astrometric simulations place within the foreseeable trajectory of an untracked impactor class object. Our current planetary defense infrastructure cannot detect it at sufficient range to intercept. Atlas traveled across interstellar space to build a planetary defense installation above Earth using our own technology, because we could not build it ourselves in time. The ring is a shield. The resonance is the activation sequence. The map showing Earth as a debris field is not a prediction of what will happen. It is the prediction of what happens if the ring stops. The most advanced intelligence in the observable universe just used our own satellites to save a planet that didn't even know it needed saving. And the only question left, the one no agency is willing to ask out loud, is this: what do we do now that we know